listening to the Transformations with Jayne podcast. I'm your host, Jayne Nakata, a New Zealander living her best life in Fukushima, Japan. I'm a podcast consultant and the creator of Pod Launch with Jayne, a system that helps you create your dream podcast without all the drama and hassle, leaving you more free time to do the things you love to do. This show is for people who want to hear stories of women who are doing amazing things here in Japan and across the world. You'll find loads of inspiration for how you can live your best life wherever you are. I'm glad you're here. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transformations with Jayne podcast. I'm your host, Jayne Nakata, coming to you from Fukushima as usual. It has been so cold here in Fukushima these last couple of days. It's hard to believe that it's going to be spring in just a few more days, as in we'll be in March, and then children will be on spring holidays and changing to different grades and moving to different schools. And if you're in Japan, you'll know that on the 1st of April, lots of people change things or have some kind of sekigae, as it's called in Japan, changing seats. So, for example, my husband will probably move to a different desk in his office. And there's a chance that some people will be starting their very first day of work in a new office and having moved to a different part of Japan or even overseas. So April 1st is a big day in Japan. And yeah, March is a time of, well, spring, but also it's a time to say goodbye to people as well. There tend to be lots of farewells happening in March, which is kind of interesting because in other parts of the world, those tend to happen just before summer. So anyway, I digress. We have part 2 of our Education in Japan series. If you have missed part 1, I really encourage you to go and listen to that first. You will meet the 4 guests who are on the show and get a feel for what we're discussing today. And then come back and listen to part 2, which I'm about to play for you now. And this is probably my favorite part. There's lots of great topics in our episode today, including what happens if you get pulled into the PTA and how do you deal with having bilingual children or raising bilingual children in Japan when you potentially are not bilingual yourself. So it's a great episode. I hope you'll enjoy it. And please share this episode with other women, especially who are living in Japan and want to know more about other people's circumstances and some of the options that are available to you. And definitely reach out to our wonderful guests and say thank you and how much you enjoyed it, because they've really enjoyed interacting with the listeners of this show so far. We are an awesome lot. We are, yes. All right, I hope you enjoy the episode. So we had some questions about PTA. Have you ever done the PTA? Yes, Fran, you have. Tell us about your experience on the PTA. What happened?
I'm actually on the PTA this year for the first time. My son's a 4th grader now at the elementary school, and it's compulsory for each mother to volunteer at least once during their child's elementary school life. And many mothers recommended I do not wait until 6th grade because that's one of the hardest ones to complete. I'm not sure I chose the right year. I'm doing Bellmark this year, which...
yeah, it's me too. I'm the Bellmark lady on my son's run. Yeah.
If you don't know what Bellmark is, people who buy products at the supermarket, there are little bell-shaped kind of coupon things that you cut out on the back of packaging and collect them. And then once you have a certain amount, you can deliver them to the school, and your school can earn points to buy, I guess, craft supplies, sports supplies, all kinds of
sporting equipment. They buy 3 basketballs with all of those bell marks that you spend hours sorting and sticking and collecting, right? Yeah.
Right. So it's the PTA mum's job to collect all these Bellmark little tiny tickets. Some of them aren't on cardboard; they're on flimsy plastic packaging. It's a nightmare, and they all get stuck together. Some parents nicely cut them out for you and deliver them to school, all divided up by points. It's at time consuming and boring job. I think I would have much rather do like gardening or sports day or something else, which is a bit more bit more interesting. But yeah, I'm glad it's almost done.
Yes, almost over. I got roped into the first grade for my son, he's in the first grade this year. And I got this phone call because it's Corona. Like normally you would have a meeting at school where you would go and the teacher would say, okay, now we're going to choose the yakuin. And for the first grade, like the mums are pretty much fighting to be chosen for first grade because they're like, I want to get this out of the way. And so I was like, I'm not putting my hand up for first grade because I know there are mothers who are busy and working and struggling and really want to get this done in the first grade. Whereas I work from home, I'm more flexible. I can do it anytime. But I got this phone call saying, "Oh, Nakata-san, would you do first grade PTA?" And I'm like, surely there's somebody else who wants to do it this year. Is there really nobody? And they're like, there's nobody else who's volunteered because, and I think they all sort of were, because of COVID, they were sort of worried about it or something. I don't know. And I'm like, well, okay then. Sure, I'll get it out of the way and do it first grade for my son. I haven't done my daughter's one yet. She's going to be fifth grade next year, but I have put my name down to potentially take my turn for the team in fifth grade because yeah, apparently you want to avoid being in the sixth grade PTA. But yeah, as that sort of seems to be across Japan, rumor that the sixth grade is bad. But like, if you can be on the PTA during COVID, do it because everything's cancelled. Like all this ridiculous stuff that you don't want to have to do is cancelled. And even though they try to schedule stuff, they end up cancelling it. So I think the worst thing I've had to do is go to school at 7:20 in the morning and stand outside in -1 degrees and say good morning to the kids for a morning aisatsu once. That was a couple of weeks ago. And they won't be doing that again because now we're, it's not a time where they can have parents coming together. So yeah, if you can do it during COVID, put your hand up, get it done. It's not going to be so bad. Yeah, being the bell mark lady sucks, I have to say. But if your kids are older, you can make them do it. They can totally do it and they can totally help you. So don't be like, the mum has to make it all perfect and do it. It's interesting to hear your school's strategy for doing it is a bit different to ours. We get all ours sorted and sent and just given to us, probably because it's COVID, right? They don't want us getting together. Some poor sucker has sorted them all so that they're all the same kind. And we just take them home and stick them on paper. And then send them back again. We don't have to be together to do them or anything. Thank goodness for that. So it's not as bad as I thought. But I was thinking, is this like the job they give the foreigners, right? Because it's like all of my foreign friends are like, yeah, I've been the bellmark lady. I've got the bellmark tanto. And I'm like, well, what else? What other job are you going to do, really? Everyone has to take a turn. And how about your experience with PTA in private school, Jordana? Is it different or similar?
In kindergarten, PTA was a bit more involved with like school events and what have you. And it was kind of a nice environment because the PTA had like a sewing circle and a tea ceremony circle and different little groups. So it was a nice way in the first year to meet all the different mums because they had organised like mini events and what have you. And it was kind of a relaxed, more kind of friendly vibe in collaboration with the school. And elementary school, it's kind of hard to describe. The PTA, it isn't officially called a PTA. It's like the dads group. So the dads are the ones who do all the helping for events. So there'll be 2 dads from each year and they will work with the headmaster of the school and they'll help assist with anything that's going on within the school. And then there's also like 2 mums who help, but it's not really that involved. There isn't like a really kind of set jobs for mums in the PTA. So it's a different system, I think, maybe compared to other schools.
Definitely. I like the sound of that system.
Yeah. It's very much like a family feeling within the school. Right. I think a lot of the, graduates of that school, they send their kids to that school. So it's that, in-school community through the generations, which I think the dads kind of enjoy. I think they, it's a chance to kind of have a few beers and plan some stuff. They seem to enjoy it anyway, from what I've heard. there isn't any. It's highly unlikely I'll be asked to do anything for my son's education there. Yeah, so lucky escape there.
Yeah, I noticed the PTA at my son's kindergarten it wasn't run by the dads, but the dads were really into it. And there was quite a lot of young dads who would like show up and they would like really get into the sports days and helping. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. This is how it should be. It shouldn't be just all the mums hanging around and, the dad's not coming and things like that. So I really liked that about when I saw that at kindy. And so I was just discussing it with some of my own friends in Japan, in New Zealand, last night on WhatsApp, because I've been told I have to take a turn for the team on the Kodomokai coming up. The Kodomokai, it's your neighborhood children's association that seems to run alongside the PTA. And I'm like, why do we even have this? We have a PTA. Like, can we just not make this part of the PTA and just, why do we have this whole separate other thing to use up my time on? Anyway, I'm now officially Taikubu Ichi, which is like I'm in the sports and recreation potentially section of the kids association, representative number 1, but I'm not Bujo Fukubujo, which is great. So just like minion 1 in that section. I don't know what I'm doing, but luckily my next door neighbor was in the Taikubu last year, so she can sort of point me in the right direction. And it's COVID, so mostly things are cancelled, I think. So this is the hope I'm holding on to for the next year anyway, that there won't be any of the major things that they would normally have. But I'd love to hear your perspective on PTA. Have you enjoyed it even? I know, Jackie, you had some experiences. Please tell us about yours.
Yeah. I do remember feeling really anxious and, oh my God, I hope I don't get called up for the PTA. Mainly not because of the time aspect, mainly because of the language issues. Even if you can speak well enough, the reading and the writing and sending the text messages to everyone and all that stuff. But I did get called up, and I have to say it was the best experience, really. I only had to go to a few meetings. There were 3 of us representing our class, and the other 2 mothers were much busier than I was. And so I was like happy to just go along to the meetings on behalf of them. And it was always fine. And what I learned was that it was just really good to get an inside look into the school, to see the teachers operating outside of the classroom, to get to know the principal, just learning how the school system works a little bit better. The tasks that I was assigned were really easy, completely manageable. Yeah, I had a really good year. It was really enjoyable. I think it's just, again, it's the fear of the unknown, and everything always works out. People will help you. It was good. It was fine.
Well, see, that's a really nice, really nice thing to hear, right, Christine? We often just hear like, "Wow, I hate the PTA, man."
Yeah, well, there could be an aspect of ignorance is bliss,
Could be.
not really knowing completely what's going on.
By the way, what year were you doing? What year were you in? Was it like first grade or fifth grade?
Yes, I think it was my son's 5th grade year. I didn't get called up with my second son. It was my first son's 5th grade year. I still had a small child at home, Tyler, so maybe 4th or 5th grade. There were some exceptions for people who had small kids at home at our school. Like you could get an exemption. The biggest stress of it all was who was going to buy the flowers to give to the teacher at the end of the year. There was a lot of going back and forth about that, which was stressful at the time. But on the whole, I learned a lot. I got to know some of the teachers really well, and they really helped me a lot when my second son came through the same school, because my 2 kids are really different in personality. So whereas I didn't have any problems with my older one, had a lot of problems with my younger one, and since the teachers already knew me, it paved the way.
Oh, nice.
So I only have good things to say about it. Yeah.
How about your family, Christine? Any comments about the PTA? Do you want to comment or not?
This is a potentially controversial take. We have nothing to do with the PTA in our area. We have no idea if a kodomo-kai exists in our area. As hoikuen parents, they don't ask you to do anything. So everything about your kids' hapyokai and whatever they're preparing or whatever they need for school, they tend to take care of it completely on their own within the hoikuen, and parents just show up and watch sports day happen, or watch the Christmas play happen, and we're not involved in any of that stuff that I've heard from my friends who have kids in yochien. You start getting involved in at a very early age. And then again, because we've had such a interesting time getting started in elementary school, most of the parents' meetings have been canceled. Most of the PTA meetings that are held in person have been canceled. And so what we get each year is the paper saying, will you be part of the PTA and do you want to run? And every year so far, my husband has said, thanks, but no. And nobody really comes after us. So I don't know. So far, we haven't had anything to do with it. And maybe we're missing out on some of the more positive aspects of it that Jackie mentioned, because we are relatively insulated in our neighborhood in that we don't get all the helpful gossip in terms of expectation management or things like that from some of the senpai parents. We just kind of have a close-knit group of people that we've been in touch with since we moved into that area, but also don't really need to deal with some of the aspects of it that we've heard less positive things about. I will say, though, that if we have to do it, we have already agreed that that is my husband's job. And he is a process engineer by trade and training, and he is chomping at the bit because all he thinks about all day long is how can we change this so that it can be safer and more efficient, right? So he's just ready to get into the PTA and change things and almost daring them to bring him
what's
in
headed. Yeah.
See what he can make more efficient in these processes. So that's going to be his bag, though. I'm just happy to take pictures at sports day and honestly do as little as possible for these couple of years while we're just trying to keep everything afloat.
Exactly, right? And that's the situation with a lot of families, is trying to keep it afloat. And in my school, I noticed that people are realizing, oh, it's actually okay if we cancel everything. We just do the bare minimum. It's actually quite nice. Could we not go back to what we used to do before? Because look how irrelevant it has been. Of course, it would be nice to have sports day again, that sort of thing. But, do you need all the parents involved? Actually, no. Parents could just show up and watch, let the kids do things, and that's what I find frustrating, is that the PTA activities are things that kids could be doing that would give them a lot of confidence and growth opportunities, so that for some reason the parents are doing these jobs, or they don't actually benefit the kids at all, or it's just some kind of, I don't know, this is we could be in the classroom helping or doing something actually that is useful for the teachers and things, but it's nobody's thought about what anybody's actually doing for the last 20 years, and nobody's process orientated husband has been the kaicho and has had the gumption to say, actually, let's just burn it all down and start again, which I would like to see that. But I have noticed more fathers taking part. So send your husband along, and because they won't be volunteering for things that are a waste of time to do. Alrighty, thank you for your different perspectives on the PTA. Let's talk a little bit about bilingualism. This is something that every parent in Japan who has a child who is half Japanese is worried or thinking about all the time. And I'd love to hear, so we had a question from Alina, who is a member of our Instagram community, and she's a lovely Romanian woman who lives in Japan and has two small children. So I know when you have small children, it's kind of hard to imagine how am I going to do it so that this works out? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? Are my kids going to be okay in the future? It's really hard to know. And so it's really great to hear from people who are a little bit ahead of you in the game, who can give you some pointers or some advice, or even just share their experience about what it's been like for them to have kids growing up with two languages in Japan. And she said she's struggling with the expectations around her kids speaking English and in the expectations on herself. And I think that's half of the problem, is the expectations we have for ourselves. So Jackie, do you want to give us some of your experience from, now you have an adult who's doing well? What's the secret sauce?
He's bilingual.
Yeah, right.
We're still bilingual.
Sauce? What's been something that's really helped you, or strategies, any strategies you've used, or the expectations for yourself around your kids? I know your sons are quite different, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's different for every family. Alina's family, there's actually 3 languages, really. Yeah. She's Romanian, so it's going to be different for her than it was for me, and for you, and for Christine. I mean, you've lived overseas, so you have all those other different things going on as well. So I really only can talk about my family, but I had decided before they were even born that they would be bilingual. And I think getting my husband on board before they were born as well was also really helpful, and that we had decided what we would do and how we would approach it, because of course, many times over the years, we've had a lot of criticism from people, including in our own family, about the kids being bilingual, and more criticism, but concerns as to whether they will be functioning adults at the end of it. Thankfully, it's pretty much they've been proven wrong. But yeah, we have had to stand our ground a lot with the things we decided to do. And then I think also, even within a family, the personalities I mentioned before, how my kids are so different, the way they've learned their languages is really different between the 2 kids. And I think it's so tempting, it was so hard not to compare them. You know, I've one who's pretty academic, loves reading, loves studying, loves learning. And then I have one who loves playing games and is quite sporty and absolutely hates anything to do with school. So how do you get them both to be bilingual, particularly with reading? You know, I think just accepting their personalities and how they like to learn things has been important as a parent to understand, and just try to do the best you can with the gaming. You know, we get off YouTube, you know, that kind of thing. But he maintains that he learned to read and write from YouTube and playing Minecraft. So
I'm noticing my son's picking up a lot of things thanks to YouTube, thanks to various like reading things,
reading
and hearing and reading things together. I'm like, how are you able to read that? Like, I haven't taught you that, and I only learned it from YouTube. I'm like, okay, thank you, YouTube. Something good from YouTube.
That's my son Tyler as well. Like he says, I learned from having to write this stuff on the computer or the iPad. And then my other one's like reading all the Harry Potter books before he started school and all that sort of stuff. So he just loves reading and learning that way. So different strokes for different folks, I guess. But I think through it all, really just that we always had a desire for them to be bilingual, and that was our approach, that was our strategy, that we wanted to achieve that. So we did not extreme stuff, but just with that goal in mind, I think.
It's heartening to know, right? Like it can all work out, even if you can't send your kid to international school.
Yeah, I mean, international school's not an option. I have one who hates reading, so that's not an option. You know, but I guess my main perspective is actually that it all works out. I mean, it's not encouraging. Well, maybe it's encouraging, but it's not what people want to hear, really, that it all just works out. But it has for us. So I hope it does for other people too.
Yeah, exactly. How about you, Christine? Your situation with, you know, obviously you were a working mother from when the kids were a young age and they went to Japanese hoikuem. And how does that play out in your family with bilingualism?
I've always known that we would speak English at home because I just don't feel myself, honestly, speaking Japanese. And it was something that my husband also thought would be valuable. I know there's all of these different models for raising bilingual children, and lots of people use more of a one parent, one language model, but we felt it to be quite stilted to have conversations with ourselves and then speaking to the kids in different languages. And so English has become more of our home language. So when we watch movies or listen to music or play board games, for the most part, we're using English versions of all of these kinds of things. And it balances out a bit the social learning of the language that the kids are picking up in Hoikuen. One thing that I will say, though, is in our kind of decision to not feel too full on about teaching either language to the kids, there have been moments where we felt a little behind the ball. So our Hoikuen brings in a gakken teacher every couple of weeks. And of course, they do things and the kids learn how to write their names, but it's not a very academically focused program. So the length of time that the kids spend sitting and in kind of focused classwork, or the amount of work that they did in hiragana and katakana in the year before elementary school, was very minimal. And being first-time parents and a little bit oblivious, we didn't realize how minimal it was until our son started first grade. And they tell you, oh, everybody starts at the beginning, but they don't really. So that was one thing that caught us a little bit off, because we had been trying to just like let them get their confidence in speaking and kind of operating in the different language systems, and not trying to be too like workbook repetition heavy when they were toddlers. And that has, been a bit of a challenge sometimes. So we're a little bit more aware of it as my daughter is entering her last year before elementary school, that we probably need to tighten things up a little bit with her, with both her English and her Japanese, in terms of writing and recognition of the letters, or, the syllabary, pros and cons maybe to all of these different things. But one thing I found when we were trying to teach my son more of the phonics and kind of get him out of only speaking and, understanding English, but to also reading and writing, was that it wasn't great for our parent-child dynamic for me to also try to be his phonics teacher, especially because he and I learn and think in very different ways. So that is something that we pretty quickly outsourced. We got him a tutor on OutSchool for a little while, and she would meet with him for a pretty long time, 50 minutes, but he was into it. And she would do a combination of introducing things to him and doing videos and doing games, but she basically taught him all of his foundational phonics. And then from there, we've put him into a program called Savvy Reading, which is designed for kids growing up in America, doing these little 25-minute like reading coaching sessions. And a lot of kids, I think, do them after school, but he does it at 7 o'clock in the morning, Japan time. So, Tuesday through Friday, he wakes up, he has a quick breakfast, and then he's on the iPad doing 25 minutes of this phonics. And it's, follows a pattern, and there's all these different elements that they touch on. And then, he finishes getting ready and he goes to elementary school here in Japan. And it's actually been fantastic because it's fun for him, but it's a little bit structured, and it's not me who is doing it. So it's ended up working out really well for us. And I had the goal, or going back to your earlier question about expectations, that I was hoping to keep him close to grade level in reading and writing. And I don't know that we're quite there, but he's hanging in there and he's moving along. So for the balance of stress and fighting over it and gradual progress, we're opting for the latter these days. And I suppose always have the option to ramp it up in the future if that's what we decide we need to do.
Yeah. Well, good on you for getting ahead of it now and not letting it sort of slide for too long and then trying to claw your way back. Because this is something I've sort of noticed with my own family. Like we, for example, my daughter, was very far behind her grade, like very, very far behind her grade level for reading and writing. Thankfully, we had a year in Sweden where she went to international school that caught her up and they helped her to catch up. They really were amazing, and for both of my kids. And so I'm like, oh, I got a reprieve. And now we're able to sort of keep moving forward from this place of having that 1 year bonus overseas, but yeah, also having to catch up on Japanese as well was a bit of a struggle for them, which was the cost of taking a year out of Japanese education and going overseas for a year. So anyway, here we are back in Japan, and yeah, working with what we have going on. Any learnings so far in your journeys with bilingualism? And I know you can only sort of talk about how it's gone for, for the last 11 years in your case, Fran, and that. What's been your learning so far? What's worked for you?
I have had a couple of examples of what not to do. We have a couple of family friends who have one parent who speaks English, and neither of their children can actually speak English. The parents just haven't encouraged it or worked on it or anything. And that shocked me when I first met them, and I just decided that day I will not let that happen to my kids. I just think English is too important, and especially in the future, if we ever go back to New Zealand, I really would love them to have that base.
Yeah.
So yeah, just within myself making that decision of not letting it slip. Even if they speak to me in Japanese, which of course, happens when they come home after speaking Japanese all day, I will only ever answer in English, and any communication we have through a phone or anything, it's always in English on my part. Whenever I turn on the TV, it's to watch something in English, and same with music that I play. It's as much as possible just trying to create that environment at home, because as soon as we step out the door, everything is not that way. So yeah, as you said, just trying to create that little slice of New Zealand within these four walls, and making this bubble where we can really try and enjoy speaking English with each other, and just keeping at it. Just don't give up, even if sometimes it's easier to say something in Japanese or whatever. We're actually in an interesting situation here, which is probably could have its own podcast. We live with my husband's mother, who does not speak English at all.
Sure.
So when we're all together as a family, unfortunately, we have to translate between the two, because I've made that decision only to speak English at home, but she only speaks Japanese. We often have to spend a lot of time translating and going back and forth and explaining things to each other. But yeah, despite the effort, I do believe it's worth it just for my kid.
That is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I only have that happen when we visit our parents, my husband's parents, for like a week, and suddenly I end up speaking Japanese to the kids when I would never do that in my own home, just because the grandparents are there and they don't understand. And yeah, it's a slippery slope, right? It's easy to get on that slippery slope and slide on down, just because it's so much easier to just switch to Japanese so that everybody can understand. Wow, well done for keeping at it, is all I have to say. Yeah. How about in your case, Joe?
My son, he was, I would say, completely bilingual up until the end of kindergarten. And I've definitely, because he loves to talk. Like, he wakes up talking, he goes to sleep talking. He just loves to talk. So going to Japanese elementary school, I've really seen how his English is becoming his minority language. So, like, especially in the second grade, I've really had to pay attention to what he's saying a lot more, because the vocabulary, he's just missing vocabulary in English that he easily can grab in Japanese. So really trying to listen to him and give him that language whilst we're talking. Yeah, and keeping on top of, his reading at home. I think, reading books and making that conscious effort. Like, before, I'd only ever, I teach up to 5-year-olds is my kind of area. They learn it so easily, and it's, if they're in that environment, they'll learn it. But as they get older, you do have to make that really real conscious effort to make sure, they're reading enough English and speaking enough English and getting enough exposure. Yeah. So that's been a bit of a, not a shock, but I've really had to check myself the last 6 months to make sure that I'm keeping on top of it to support him.
Yeah, it can get away from you without you realizing it. And kids do go through these sort of phases, don't they, of being more strong in English and then being more strong in Japanese. And for my kids who had a year away from Japan, being in Sweden, it was a huge boost to their English, both reading and writing and being in school, which I'm so grateful for, because it put my son on the path to being a reader in English, that I probably wouldn't have had the energy or wanted to go through the battle to get him to start reading. But now he can. It's easy just to sort of lean into that and keep him moving forward. And they're actually a lot more motivated now, because now that they've been overseas and they understand the value of having English and being able to read and write in English, they are more willing to study in English, do their own English study here in Japan. And so, yeah, we've sort of set up a system where they do English homework after school as well as their Japanese homework, which they would never have agreed to before. But now my daughter is like, yeah, I'm going to go to school overseas at some point, and I want to be able to read and write in English. And so she's 10 and she's motivated because she's had that. But yeah, for my own expectations, I think that we put a lot of stress on ourselves as parents to, the kids have to be bilingual, and what's going to happen if they don't. But I have heard other sort of like heartening stories of kids, making it work for themselves when they do get older. But I think doing what you can do right now is really important, and it does help them. So yeah, it is a matter of sort of like leaning into it, even though it's not fun, or when your kids don't want to do it. But yeah, if you can find a way to show them how it's going to benefit them now, like show them now as, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds, however old they are, I really do think it does help them to understand why they have to do this. But yeah, giving your kids those that foundation so they do have options in the future is all we can do, really. It's their choice to pick up and run with it from then on. Wow, what a great episode that was. I really enjoyed hearing all of the feedback from different guests about how being in the PTA works where they live, or how being bilingual works in their family. And it's really important to keep in mind that every family is different, every kid is different, all the dynamics are different. Even the place you live in Japan may have an effect on how things are in your town. Are there other international families around you can hang out with, or maybe not? Is there an international school you can send your children to if you want to nearby? Those kinds of things are all different depending on where you live. And the PTA can be fun, as Jackie said. I haven't actually had to deal with any PTA staff, as in I've just done my little sticking the bell marks on the papers and then sending it back. And in a couple of weeks, my PTA duty for the first grade will be over with minimal fuss. So I'm very glad I did it this year, got that out of the way. Thank you for that, COVID. One of the silver linings there, that's for sure. So we would love to hear from you. Come and find us over on Instagram at Transformations with Jayne, and tell us your take on bilingualism, where you are, how it works in your family, or share the episode on your stories and tag us and let us know what really resonated with you. We'd really love to hear from you. So what is coming up on the show next? Well, we have some really lovely guests coming, actually. I have a wonderful interview with Paige from Whole Self Creative coming up, which I can't wait to share with you. And I have a few more guests who I'm about to record with, so I'll tell you a little bit more about them very, very soon. So thank you so much for listening. As always, we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.